Hey class, Mehr here. The next assignment we're going to be exploring compositional drawing as it pertains to charcoal on the 18 by 24 pad. And this is going to be, again, as we're moving back and forth between sketchbook and these larger pads, we're going to try to apply the same principles as we did prior to this larger format. Now, what has happened before when we were drawing in a sketchbook, the paper itself is actually much smaller. So, just as much as we do handwriting and all these things, when we were drawing more with our wrists. When we're going to be doing the charcoal drawing, we're going to try to start drawing more with our elbows. So rather than thinking of maybe using this vine charcoal that I'll be using, rather than thinking of it used as a pencil, would be drawing like this. Since we're going to be making larger movements, it's much easier for the hand and the body to make marks when it is on the bottom side, rather than when you're on the top, the bottom of your palm is going to be scraping along the paper, which would cause a lot of scuffed work to happen. So by fixing that, we're moving this kind of the palm up away from the paper and leaving this only down towards the bottom. So to show you this, we're going to make another quick sketch, compositional sketch, going through the same steps as we did last time, except this time we're just going to be, again, changing the material and the size and scale. So again, let's go ahead and look at our still life, and we'll walk through it step by step. Okay, here you can see the same uh, um, still life that I kind of rearranged. I made the bag a little bit larger as an opening. So when I stand up to draw this, you'll see it's changed a little bit. There's some different types of shadow shapes happening. The shadow shapes being the shadow that's leaving from the can onto the bag, coming and going from these different intersectional points that we'll use as a way of drawing the compositional sketch. We're going to use those as points. Now again, now I'm going to look down so you can see the drawing. So you might not, it's going to be really difficult to see both. But what I want to do is the top of the bag, which is right here, I want to actually try to get that again on towards the top of the paper by making a kind of mark indicating that. So as we look down, this is going to be the mark for the bag, and I'm just going to just indicate it by just a horizontal line, even though we're going to adjust this later. Here we go. And one thing that we want to actually get is this other line, which is, as we look up, part of the side of the bag. And this is just going to be, again, getting the scale down, and the scale, as we want, again, for the bottom of the can to go, is right next to that part of the bag. I'm going to use, again, another diagrammatical line to kind of indicate the size and top part of where the can is actually meeting the bag. And again, for our purposes here, to make it fast, I'm just going to be making it a very general rectangle. Remember, we're just here composing. We're not necessarily, I'm trying to get the proximity and relationship to the side, the can, and the bag. And now we're going to try to translate some of this information down to the paper, as we can see. All right, and bringing it back down in, bringing the top line of the bag, which I'm going to say is like right here. Again, we're going to have opportunities to readjust what this will look like. And then the side of the bag, which is kind of coming over here and coming down at kind of an angle and bringing in right there. Now, this might be a little bit more difficult to see, but as we are continue drawing, it'll just keep on manifesting itself the more lines we put in. Now from here on, we're going to try to also get the background. And the background, see that green line for the of the background of the green sheet that I have on. I'm going to try to see where that green sheet intersects the bag and also the can. And I'm just going to say from right here that it's kind of at the lower section of the can. It comes out through the bottom of the bag, as you can see, and it kind of shoots out over here. Now, so when I put this line, again, it's a horizontal line, I can see that the dimensions that I have for my bag are a little bit off, because you can see that this back part of the bag, which is right over here, I have it being right where that line is. So here, this is the great thing about charcoal, is I'm just going to use my hand and just clean that right off. And I'm going to make a little quick correction. And the great thing about using charcoal is it allows you to make many very quick little corrections as we are drawing. And this is the fun part about it. We get to keep on making these corrections. And you'll see how they just kind of, all these like corrections kind of go away as we do this more. Now that we have everything somewhat in play, I'm going to do again another picking a point on my can right here, which is just a rectangle. And I'm going to start forming again a contour drawing of the ellipsis of the can, how it goes around. And this is going to be the same type of drawing that we were doing before with the contour drawing. And I'm going to again speed this up just a little bit so we can get a nice little distance, because we can again spend a lot of time just thinking about the contour. But right now I think we're going to just try to go for the general shape. Remember, like with these drawings, compositional drawings, we want to go with the general information first. And we'll take that general information and put value to it. And then we put more values to it. We can actually put more detail back in after. Alright, and going back up towards the bottom. And voila. I'm going to also connect this very important shadow shape to the bottom of the can. And now we have this very generalized kind of crushed can shape. We're starting to get this relationship, which is really important, which is right here between the bag and the can. Alright. Good. And now we're going to start thinking of these shadow shapes, which are going to be very important as well as we move forward. But we want to get all of these the general kind of shape of the bag itself, all of this kind of stuff we would like to get in before we start doing the shadow shape. Alright, it's looking pretty good. Very general, but it's going to work for our purposes. So now I'm going to focus on the shadows, which again are the ground shadow onto the bag, onto the ground over here, and then back again onto the background. So as that looks, I'm going to see where it leaves the can here, which is right about here, and it hits the bag really close to the bottom. Not quite at the total bottom, but close to it. Then we have this really interesting line that looks like it's curving, but it's kind of going straight and going up, and then hitting the bag and rolling up about to look right here, and it drops off right there onto the bag. Then we have another shadow over here, doing the same thing, going up at kind of an angle, distance. That's how the light is moving. And then also the bag is, we've got this other shadow shape coming down. We've got some interesting ones because I'm using multiple lights, which, you know, sometimes you might want to just use one light, but I think it's kind of fun, so I'm going to use all the light shadows that I'm finding there. That's looking pretty good. And then from now on, I could start adding my values. Now again, I think it's a really good idea to start with the ground shadows. And a really fun thing that you can do with this charcoal is that you have a long burnt stick. What you can do is just break off a little piece of it, like that. So rather than using a tip of the charcoal, you can use the side of the charcoal. And here, just as we were doing with our pencil when we put it sideways to do the shadows on the sketchbook, we're going to do the same thing on the ground over here. Using the side, it just makes the it go a lot faster than just using the tip, because now this is a whole entire form happening here. Okay, good. And I'm going to try to get some more of these values happening. One's on the background over here. And you'll see as we go further, I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this shadow because it's kind of going away from the bag. And then there's like the shadow of the bag itself, which has another couple properties going on there, which, again, when you use your finger, you can smooth some of these shadows out, which happens pretty fast. A little bit of blending. You can use your tortillon, the blending stub that's paper. That sometimes allows for much more specific shading, but for our purposes here, we're just doing a sketch. So we're not trying to make it so clean at this exact moment. Now we're going to try to reiterate this bag again and get this shadow of, again, I'm going to use a little bit of a contour, kind of trying to make this kind of shape that I have over here just a little bit more specific. Using the flat piece again, I'm going to just pull down some of that value of the bag. And a couple of things you need to ask yourself sometimes when you're doing shadows. And again, just like maybe the game that we had with the contour drawing, is that we're going to ask ourselves a series of questions. And sometimes with the contour, just like one of the questions was which direction you want to go. And you know, every intersection you find a new direction to go. Here, when it comes to shadows, we're going to ask ourselves, which shadow is darker? Is it this part of the bag or the shadow behind it? And of course, this could be up to much debate. But for right now, I think I'm going to actually state that I feel that the shadow behind it is darker. And it kind of goes up over this material, comes to about right there. So I want to make this the darker shadow. So I'm going to get that and actually place a little bit more pressure. And now we have a darker shadow happening right behind the bag, which is going to make this part of the bag pop. So I'm going to keep going, and you'll start seeing maybe a little bit more closely what's happening over here. So now the shadow behind and the shadow reflecting on the outside of the bag, which is on a white surface. So now we're having different types of surfaces. Okay, so now we're going to just keep on moving in. Before we put more detail in here, because we want to get all of our values set first, before we start actually trying to get values of everywhere else, I'm going to try to get this value of on the paper bag itself on this side. And of course, the thing that we're going to be talking about a lot more as we go into landscape drawing is that there are different textures and values based off of what the object actually is. So this paper bag is actually brown, that has a different value than the white can. So what we're going to do as the light side of the can, I'm sorry, not the can, of the bag, we're going to give it just a very light value because it's a brown bag. So by just doing that a little bit, and then we can clear some of the value of that by blending it. Okay. And now going into the top of the bag, just to give a little bit of value. We got a shadow right here happening on that side of the bag. There's a little bit of a shadow right there, but for the most part, it's going to be just a darker value than the light side, but not as dark as the back side. So we're going to leave it right there. Okay, and we can come back to this too. We're going to go try to get this can all situated. So now the can is trying to figure out what it's wanting to do. And as we look at the can, the actual can, we can see that there are this kind of shadow shape coming down here. But there's also some reflected light happening from the whiteness of the actual surface. We're going to try to go with just the most generalized value at this exact moment. So we're going to fill that in now. Sometimes I like starting with the darkest, and we call this like keying in the value, because whatever your darkest value is, you can use that to find the other values around the object. For instance, this little shadow shape around the top here, as it goes into this kind of more gray area, there's a little bit more of a shadow happening here. It goes down and around, and a little bit darker of this one that comes over here, because this shadow is not nearly as dark as the other. Okay, so I'm going to use this kind of shape as paint the part of the darkest values, and again just filling in that value. Before we start trying to do more of the drawing of the details of the can, I want to get all these kind of values set up. So the darker one first, second, third, and we got the transition. We got a little bit happening right over here and at the bottom. Okay, now we're at a good place. So now we can start asking some similar questions as we did before, and also start cleaning up some of these lines. And I could also start maybe even correcting some of the drawing that I did before. Like, so for instance, right here, this was a little bit off at the bottom. So I'm just fixing that. And then as I go through here, I get to have more of those creases that I want to actually show. Coming back and cleaning up this line, it got a little fuzzy. Sometimes when you put these in, those lines get a little bit more fuzzy. Okay. Now I have this side that I need to fix a little bit, and it's sometimes like, how do I fix that? Well, there's a couple different ways. You can get the kneaded eraser out. So we can use that gummy rubber eraser, and you can see that we're taking this away, and it works pretty good. Another way that we can do this is that we can start asking ourselves some other questions, and some of them is what's darker, this or that, and then also the background, that green background, which one is darker? And even though the background is lit, one way that we can look at that line of the can is to think of this kind of background as being somewhat of a value as well. So, using that side, I start making the value of the background. And I'm just going to leave just a little bit of it so I can just smooth it out enough so we can see what that looks like. Alright, so that makes that can, that whiteness where we'd use the kneaded eraser to get that really, really white part of the, if you can see that, of the can, the right side where the light is hitting, it's actually going right into, so which one is brighter? And that can is really bright. So that's what we're kind of wanting to look for right now. Is like, where is the value of the green in relationship to the can? Again, the green in relationship to the bag, and the shadows that. So this is kind of a both a compositional drawing and also one where we're thinking about value. Now, of course, I want to kind of clean up this kind of drawing of the, I can go into, again, more of the details of the cap. There's a little shadow that's really kind of neat. That's right on the other side of the cap. These lines go much more through and intersect with each other. There's a little shadow happening right over here. So all these little details start coming out in the can that we can spend a lot of time on. And this is where drawings become fun, because now I'm not thinking about where this can is in relationship to the overall space. I can now just have fun and go, which one is darker and which one's lighter, and then just make some corrections with my kneaded eraser. So now it's becoming just about that lightness of the can on that side, which really makes this corner pop when I get that all taken care of. And there's like the little rim around the actual can itself. And you can just keep on going and going and going. Now, I haven't gone through the entire rest of it because I want to maybe show you what this might look like for the bag itself too. Remember, we did have some creases that were towards the top here. I want to kind of like, there was like this kind of really interesting part of the bag where the bag is like somewhat translucent because of how the light's going through it. You see that little triangle at the top. You see how the shadows in multiple different kind of, because there's different lights, there's multiple different angles of the light and how it's hitting. So we can kind of go through and actually look at all these different things and again use our kneaded eraser if now that top part of the bag is a little bit lighter based on what we're seeing as we're looking at the bag. Then we could just like kind of take our kneaded eraser and make it just a little bit lighter, and then take the bag and start doing some more details like this little crease that comes through on the side. The bag's a little bit darker right here, so that line's a little bit crisper. So I'm going to just kind of go through and get some of these like these lines from the creases in the bag. And that becomes just a little darker as well. So here we are, and just keeps on going. Just keep on seeing where those values are and keep it going. Now the value on, say like the value that's on the surface of where it's sitting is much more smooth, so you can smooth out some of the textures. Like the bag you can keep kind of rough because it's a rougher texture. Like the bag has just got all those, it's kind of got that cardboard-like look to it. So you can leave some of that texture in the shadow as well. And then just keep on going back and forth until you kind of get to a place where you're satisfied with how everything's looking. And again, here we go. Compositionally, this is something that is both in the size of our picture plane, plus with the value that's actually happening here. You can see it. And putting these all together is what we're going to be trying to do with charcoal. And of course, you can see if you were using a pencil, this would take a really long time. But because we're using charcoal, some of this happens really, really fast. These will typically take about, we could do quick sketches, or we can do longer ones like this one where you take a little bit more time. So I suggest possibly you know, taking a couple of these drawings and then also taking the time to get into those values, but also going back in and doing, again, going through the shapes. And you can just keep on doing this again and again. Like I can even go through this bag and kind of find that little crease over here. On the next drawing, I could actually make more creases in the bag to make it more visually interesting. I could fix this little edge that's at the top right here, which I kind of like. That's kind of fun. And I didn't really focus on that. I was just going so fast. And here we go. And it just keeps on going. So we could keep on going with the drawing. So these should take about 20-25 minutes. And when you get done, we can just do another one as well. It's good to get a lot of practice. Again, changing the composition around. Even if it's just moving the cans around or making a different kind of, maybe creasing something else a little bit more or adding a different object. So I feel that we should end there and I told you guys that we were going to get messy on this, and I got it all over my head because I have to move my glasses around. So let's get dirty. Again, I hope you guys keep those eyes wide open, but your hearts wider.